in the service, you'll be invited. Whether your chalices are fancy or plain, store-bought or homemade, or opaque or clear, they demonstrate the diversity of our ways of being in the world. So I'd like to invite you now to bring them up and place them on our altar to the element, and we'll light each one as we sing together hymn number 360. Here we have gathered.
They're two of my favorite collaborators that make children's books. And this one is set in the desert, which is one of my favorite places to be. It's beautiful and stark and rugged and just stones and rocks and cliffs and hawks and cactus. And the narrator tells us about all of the glorious things that they see as they wander through the dunes and the cliffs, and how they create a celebration to remember each of their experiences, just like we are creating this week together to celebrate what's important to us. So here's part of that story. Sometimes people ask me, "Aren't you lonely out there? Just desert all around you?" And I say, "How could I be lonely? I'm in charge of celebrations." You can tell what's worth a celebration because your heart will pound and you'll feel like you're standing on top of a mountain, and you'll catch your breath like you were breathing some new kind of air. Once I saw a triple rainbow that ended in a canyon where I'd been the day before. That's okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't from the bag. I was halfway up a hill, standing in a drizzle of rain, and it was almost dark, but I wouldn't go in because of rainbows, of course. And there, at the top of the hill, was a jackrabbit that was standing up on its hind legs, perfectly still, looking straight at that same triple rainbow. I may be the only person in the world who has seen a rabbit standing in the mist, quietly watching 3 rainbows. And that is worth a celebration anytime. So I wrote it down, I drew the hill and the rabbit and the rainbows and me. And now, every August 9th, I celebrate Rainbow Celebration Day. And another time, I was following deer tracks, taking my time, kind of humming, and I looked up in time to see a young coyote, which, by the way, Rev Denis saw a coyote this morning, trotting through the brush. She crossed in front of me in that easy, silent way that coyotes move, and she pushed into the wind. And I stood there hardly breathing, wishing that I could move that way too. I was surprised to see her stop and turn and look directly at me. She seemed to think that I was just another creature following another rocky trail, which, of course, is true. I am. She didn't hurry. She wasn't afraid. I saw her eyes and she saw mine. That look held us together. Because of that, I will never quite feel the same again. So, on September 28th, I celebrate Coyote Day. Here's what I do. I walk that same trail and I hum softly. I bring a feast that I've brought to share with her. Last time it was 3 apples, some pumpkin seeds, an ear of corn, and some big, soft, homemade ginger cookies. And the next day, I happened to pass that way again. Coyote tracks went all around the rock where the food had been, and the food was gone. Next year, I'm going to make it even better. I'll bring an extra feast, and I will eat there too. Friend, I've saved my New Year's celebration for last. Mine is a little bit different from most people, because mine comes in the spring. I let my year begin when winter ends and the morning light comes earlier. That's when I feel like starting new. I wait until the white-winged doves are back from Mexico and the wildflowers cover the hills and my favorite cactus blooms. I finally choose a day that is exactly right. Even the air has to be perfect. And the dirt has to feel good and warm on my bare feet. I have a drum that I beat to signal the day. And then I go wandering off, following all of my favorite trails to to all the places that I like. And I check how everything is doing. I spend the day admiring things. If the old desert tortoise I know from last year is strolling around, I'll go his direction for a while. I celebrate with horned toads and ravens and lizards and quail. And friend, it's not a bad party.
Is from the Reverend Joan Evier Duval. Into greater union with the mysterious. Spirit of life, mother of all, mystery beyond our understanding. Here we are, living, breathing creatures with minds that wonder and hearts that feel awe. We face questions that we know can't be answered, and tragedies that we know can't be explained. May we find patience in all that is unanswered and peace in all that will never be explained. Here we are, living, breathing creatures with open minds and tender hearts. May we hold ourselves with gentleness with all that brings us worry and all that makes our hearts break. May the living, breathing creatures that we are feel the breath of life moving in us and through all things, bringing us into greater union with the mysterious universe of which we are a part. Blessed be. Amen. So even if my calendar hadn't turned over to a new month last week, I definitely would have known that it was December, because the December craziness is already upon us. Have you noticed that every year when December rolls around, they speed up? Suddenly, people are frantic in the grocery stores. They drive like maniacs, and as my friends fly by me, they say, "So, are you ready?" It's the national season of gearing up for the holidays. And I struggle every year to gear down instead. I think most folks who know me know that I'm a seriously type A personality. And as such, I always think of myself as a person with a plan. I organize, I make lists, I check my calendar. And being a person with a plan has never caused me more grief and suffering than each year during this holiday season. As a child growing up, Christmas was huge in my family. It was a big deal. My grandmother and my mom, they went completely nuts getting ready for Christmas. So of course later, as an adult, I followed in their footsteps, and I planned Christmas for my extended family for weeks. I planned, I scheduled, I organized everything. The gifts, the meals, the tree, the cards, indoor decorations, outdoor decorations, snacks, desserts, who's arriving when, how many are coming, do I have enough beds, who's sleeping where, do the towels match, who decreed that towels have to match? But it had to be perfect because, after all, it was Christmas. The expectations were huge. So, of course, inevitably, it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't what I planned. How could it be? And after weeks of work and stress and planning, it was over in less than a day, and I was left exhausted with all of it to now deconstruct and clean up and pack away, ready for next December's bout of insanity. So for a person with a plan, understanding and accepting that life is rarely what you plan is a tough lesson to learn. But as I reflect back, I realize that I've actually had a great deal of practice with it. As a young adult, I had quite the plan for my life. High school, college, grad school, career, and family. Definitely a big family, so we could have a big Christmas. But I actually do remember in my early 20s being in a complete panic, thinking that I might be pregnant. now is not the right time to be pregnant. I can't be pregnant now. I haven't planned it. It will ruin my career. Only to discover in my early 30s, when I was planning to have a family, that I couldn't actually get pregnant. I was devastated. I had planned to have kids. I really wanted to be a mom. But 2 grueling years of infertility treatments later, and nothing. So, okay, change in plans. If I'm not going to be able to have a family, I'll pursue my career. So, I get a master's degree, I get a PhD, and I land a huge research grant to study Boston Harbor and Massachusetts Bay. I was really excited. And the phone rings. It's the doctor's office. Please come by for your prenatal vitamins. You're pregnant. This is true. This is absolutely true. And if that weren't enough, 9 months later, the beautiful, beautiful daughter that I brought home with me from South County Hospital was definitely not the child that I planned for. I'm still actually not sure that she's mine. In a family of scientists and engineers, Sarah is an artist. Sarah has no plan. She never has a plan, and she absolutely never sees the need for a plan. But you know, she's delightful. She's the light of my life. She's funny and smart and talented and loving, and she drives crazy. So if you were to ask me, what am I doing this year for the holidays? I have absolutely no idea what we're doing for the holidays this year, but I'm pretty sure that there won't be a plan. Instead, I'm going to focus on special time spent with family and friends, maybe eat some good food, go for lots of walks, hug the dog, do a lot of quilting, and really reflect on the fact that many of the best things that happened for me this season are not actually planned. Thank you. Please.
Grandparents. So we take part in their traditions that often included the other sides of their families. We always were at my father's brother's house with his wife and her family, including all of her cousins. And we would have this huge feast after opening gifts on Christmas Eve. It was a feast of pies, mostly pork pies and fruit pies, and we wouldn't go to bed until 4 in the morning. And when my brother was 16, he was captain of the high school hockey team, so he was told he could not go to Quebec. He had to be there for practices on Christmas Eve and the day after Christmas. We had to stay in town. So we all had Christmas in Connecticut for the first time. And that meant that my mother found herself in a new role. She was now the keeper of our family's traditions, which meant that she also had to invent them on the fly because we didn't have our own traditions. So that year, we opened one gift before midnight, and then we went to midnight mass. And then in the morning, we had a big breakfast with more bacon than 5 families should eat. Then we spent a leisurely 2 hours opening gifts next to the tree. And Christmas has been exactly the same every year since. Now, in previous years, she'd never had to pay much attention to things like decorations or menus, and suddenly she did. Mindful that whatever she decided, whatever we did, would become the traditions that would last for our generation and beyond. And boy, did she feel the pressure. It was an incredible opportunity, but man, everything had to be perfect. There was so much riding on it. As we've been creating our own unique Unitarian Universalist winter holiday, I've experienced something similar. In my role as minister, I generally have the joyous job of being the presider of rituals and the keeper of traditions. Now that's one thing when you're new to a congregation and quickly learn that this is what this congregation has always done. You know, water communion, flower communion, the labyrinth walk, Christmas Eve, or in this case, Christmas Eve. But it's another thing when you're creating something entirely new. Like my mother, I've been mindful that these traditions will last for at least a generation or two if we do it right. And I've also been mindful that whatever our traditions are, they have to be ours, rooted in our values, our history, our shared beliefs, our commitment, and our covenant. We can't just pick and choose from among the traditions of other faiths, taking what we like and leave the rest behind. I've known all along that whatever we do, it can't be a ripoff of Hanukkah and Kwanzaa or Diwali or even Christmas, which is so ubiquitous it's almost impossible to not borrow from it. What I learned quickly is that what makes a holiday memorable are all the little things. Because it's the little things that children remember when they get older. They don't remember the theology behind the practices. They don't remember the words of a minister. They probably won't remember a grace that gets said before a meal. But those little things make the kiddos feel like they belong, enough that they would want to name those traditions as their own and pass them on to their children. Stuff you might not even think about, like mashed potatoes having exactly the right consistency every single year, or the pie having just the right crust or just the right filling. Little things like looking forward to singing songs of the season. Man, I heard this kid massacre Feliz Navidad last night. I think that's going to be one of my new traditions. Kids feel... You ever notice the incredible attachment that kids have to that 40-year-old paper ornament that's covered with glitter and so fragile that it's like gossamer? It's about to turn into dust. And it's the most important ornament to them. They remember the plants and the decorations and the smells. They remember the rituals, the things that don't even seem like rituals. Like eating 20 pounds of bacon. In my family, woe betide the person who goes near the Christmas tree before eating their share of bacon. The things kids remember the most, though, are the stories. Not just the anecdotes about Uncle Al or that terrible blizzard and the ensuing power outage in '91, right? They remember the stories we tell about the holiday itself. How our family has celebrated over time. And more importantly, how the holiday came to be. Every child who celebrates Christmas knows the story of Jesus and the story of Rudolph. Last year, at the beginning of the holiday that we were then calling Chalika, I told the story of Daleen Marshall and her friends, who were all directors of religious education or aspiring ministers, and their hopes for creating a uniquely Unitarian Universalist holiday and their creative solution. Last year, I tried to weave it into a kind of mythical fable. As I told the story, though, I realized that there was something missing. Conflict. Because, of course, all good stories have conflict, especially religious stories. The Christmas story, if you remember, erroneously has King Herod ordering the massacre of babies to prevent the rise of the Messiah. In the Hanukkah story, Syrian King Antiochus orders the Jews to abandon the Torah to worship Greek gods and engages in another kind of massacre. Whether the stories are true or not, and the thing is, we know that the Christmas story, according to the Gospel of Matthew, isn't actually true, there's a villain. Now, Ramadan is slightly different. It celebrates the night of power, when the archangel Jibril reveals to Muhammad the first words of the book that would later come to be called the Quran. Now, there's no villain in the story, but it's so countercultural for its day that it's absolutely dripping with conflict. The story of the holiday Daleen Marshall and her crew cooked up didn't have a villain or a conflict. It was just a nice story about a bunch of nice people coming up with a nice holiday among friends, and it caught on, sort of. It's not exactly an epic tale, is it? As much as I tried to weave it that way. At least it wasn't an epic tale. Until, gloriously imperfect people got to it and created conflict by appropriating whatever traditions they felt like taking, reducing them to a curriculum and calling it all very you. The story of our little winter celebration of our values and the longest nights before the solstice, it now has conflict. Isn't that cool? The thing is that the conflicts didn't come from outside. There were nobody threatening us. The conflict came from within. We've been our own foe, right? In that very human way that happened because we messed up. Which really is about the most you thing I can think of. And the thing is that nobody has to be the villain in this story. It can be a story about conflict and hurt, the hurt that we can cause among the people we love when we aren't mindful of the little things, when we think, oh, they're just little things. The details of life and holidays and traditions that are packed with more significance than we can possibly understand if they're not our traditions. This can be a story of how we overcame conflict. I find that really interesting. I find that really memorable. I find that to be a tale that could become epic if we tell it enough. And we remember that we screwed up and worked hard to get it right. Even with that conflict in the story, this doesn't have to be a time of stress, though. We don't have to worry about getting it perfect right off the bat. It doesn't have to be completely immediate. It will evolve. It will evolve. It'll come to have a name like 9/11 or the millennial generation. It'll happen organically over time if we pay attention to the little things, expecting nothing more than we celebrate in this time. The invitation to slow down and reflect on and celebrate our values and our identity. So I was kind of hoping that we might have enough time to really get into conversation now, but I want to ask you some questions, just invite you to reflect on them in the coming week. Or maybe this is something that you've been thinking about all this week. Did you take time this week to reflect on our shared faith? Did you make a chalice? Did you buy one? Did you improvise? Did you make a 7-pointed star at home or put a mirror under or near your chalice as a reminder to reflect? Did you eat bean dishes? Did you come to the dinner on Friday night? How did you engage in our 8 principles during the last week, or the proposed Article 2 with its constellation of 7 words and love at the center? If you did all that, any of that, even one thing, what was it like for you? What did it teach you about your old traditions or new traditions or traditions you want to create? Because that's the stuff that matters. That's the stuff that's going to become the mythical, mystical, epic tale of Unitarian Universalism that our children are going to want to share. So I'd like to invite you all to now rise as you're willing and able and stand through the end of the service. Let's sing number 118.
Fourth, which we could also call a benediction, is called The Golden Present by the Reverend Marta I. Valentin. The golden present is not like the proverbial egg that expects you to sit on it and wait. It is instead a scrumptious feast to be served when you call. Look around. It awaits a response from you, one that says, yes, I see you. Yes, I choose you. Yes. The golden present ever reaches for you and wonders if you'll come to unwrap its gifts.